What is media's view of people with emotional disabilities, specifically bipolar disorder? In general, they seem to not know where to begin, literally. There is rarely any beginning to an emotional disorder when it comes to media, movies included. Just a host of symptoms and results that may or may not end in tragedy. Rarely does any media outlet, with the exception of a few indie films, talk about the genesis of emotional disorders, or EDs, and the fact that children are now being diagnosed younger and younger. Evan Perry, of Boy Interrupted, was diagnosed as bipolar at the age of 5, which means that he presented symptoms that prompted his parents to seek professional help at an even younger age. The intensity of his bipolar disorder was such that he was not only in therapy, but medicated as well. A fact that makes me wonder how many problem children throughout history, and to this day, are going undiagnosed with any number of emotional disorders. And when those problem children grow up, what happens to them then? The common misconceptions about emotional disorders are myriad. That the person with such a disability is constantly suicidal, unable to handle life at its worst, or at the end of the other end of the spectrum, they're the source of hijinks and laughs, and time has done little to dispel them, these misconceptions. A few brave films and people have come along to put an honest, even occasionally positive face on emotional disorders, especially bipolar disorder, but their voices are still shouted into silence by the sheer bulk of coverage of the results of the disability, or even by the lighter side of it. Media outlets talk about the excesses and addictions to everything from drugs and alcohol to sex and spending sprees that are attendant to emotional disorders. But few talk about the more human side of ED, the fact that these are not walking addictions and symptoms, but people with the disease. These are individuals fighting to have lives of their own, free from the worst of their disabilities. And yet, for all that the media is seemingly fascinated by emotional disorders, and it undoubtedly is, judging from all the films it churns out about ED, including pioneering films such as All About Eve and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, to more contemporary pieces such as Blue Sky and Mad Love, to semi-documentaries such as Wishful Drinking and The Secret Life of the Manic Depressive. They still largely manage to only show facets of these disorders. They show the side that works best for their bottom line. And why? Because crazy sells. ED is fascinating, especially when one knows next to nothing about it. It's like a curse that blights some people while leaving others unscathed, and many consume films, books, and TV shows in which a character has ED as a way of saying to themselves, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." Thanks to the media, the public tends to view an ED as akin to a death sentence, a terminal disease that will eventually lead to suicide. This is not necessarily true. With medical treatment and counseling, people with EDs can live long and full lives. The media often fails to show this seemingly inconvenient fact, preferring the more tragic or funny ending over the more likely scenarios. This can only be corrected by more documentaries like Boy Interrupted and more filmmakers willing to be honest about the true faces of ED, which are neither uniformly humorous or uniformly tragic. Also, those afflicted with an ED and their loved ones need to advocate for better representation in the media. They must be willing to speak out when a film, TV show, or novel is dishonest or simply misinformed about their illness. They must be willing to put themselves out there as new, more accurate faces of ED and not be ashamed or secretive about their illness. They need to own it and demand of the media and the world fair representation and treatment. There's no waiting for the media to get it right on their own. As evidenced by the civil rights movements of myriad groups, including women, blacks, and gays, it's up to the people who want to be seen and treated as equals and unique individuals, rather than just a poorly understood group, to go after the rights and acceptance that everyone else enjoys. This is especially true of the bipolar among us, who tend to be represented as moody, irresponsible, and selfish. What's perceived as mere moodiness is really a chemical imbalance that can, with medication and therapy, be controlled. It doesn't have to rule our lives, nor does it, even in those with rapid cycling bipolar disorder, fluctuate from mood to mood every few minutes. What's seen as irresponsibility is impetuousness born of the same moods that drive our emotions. In a manic or hypomanic mood, those of us with bipolar disorder are more likely to spend money, have sexual encounters, and use illegal drugs. This is a proven fact. And in this mood, there's also a feeling of invulnerability that makes us feel as if we're invincible and don't need reins on our behavior. We don't need sleep or rest or food or downtime like the rest of the human race, and we'll do anything to perpetuate this pervasive feeling of immortality. The longer we are in a manic or hypomanic mood, we understand, even if it's just instinctually, the longer we can put off the depressive mood, which can be emotionally and physically painful to the point of crippling us. Who wouldn't rather be partying or be uber productive rather than lying in bed too depressed to move, speak, or even cry? What's seen as selfishness is a desperate bid to protect ourselves from the harsher realities of manic depression. We wrap ourselves in cocoons of excess and addiction, even if it's an addiction to the very moods that can distort our thinking and play havoc with our lives, to help protect ourselves and those we love from the less pleasant facets of our nature and disorder. A need to be the life of the party may really be an attempt to please everyone around us so that we're not left alone to the hell of our own private thoughts and feelings. A need for more and more alone time may be a scrabbling for time to pull ourselves together or to find a way to cope with depression, to wait for the edges of our mania, which can bring with it more than euphoria and productivity, but rage and paranoia as well, to wear off. It can be a way of protecting ourselves from the powerful emotions that being around others can cause, or it can be a way to recharge when being around others drains us to the point of bringing on a depressive mood. Or it can simply be a need to hide the darker side of our natures from those we love because they may not love us anymore if they saw it and had to deal with it firsthand. I myself have done this, sequestered myself for hours, days, even weeks or months from people I care about because I don't want to put them off being around me. So I suppose at its heart, me time for the bipolar can be seen as selfish in that we're trying to keep what we love by hiding parts of who we are. This is something the media will never understand or recognize unless we, as bipolar people, as people with an ED in general, make ourselves heard and understood. Sharing our innermost selves may go against the grain, may be painful, may feel wrong, but it is the only way to gain the ears and hearts of the community at large. If we want a world where bipolar and ED no longer equal hopelessly insane and beyond help or understanding, we must create that world for ourselves, since no one is getting in line to do it for us. We must do it for ourselves and for the children, as trite as that may sound, who will someday have to deal with EDs and see only the worst sides of themselves represented in media. We must be their champions and make certain that the ill-prepared, ill-informed, prejudiced world that we live in now will be a world that those children will never know.